Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about the War of the Gargantuas. Some of you have been waiting a long time for this review, and I hope you find it satisfactory. The War of the Gargantuas was released in 1966, the third and final collaboration between Toho Studios and United Productions of America. It's kind of a sequel to 1965's Frankenstein vs. Baragon, or Frankenstein Conquers the World, and both films were directed by Ishiro Honda. It opens, as many of these movies do, with a boat on the water. A huge octopus emerges from the sea and starts going after the helmsman, but the attack is arrested when suddenly another giant being surfaces, killing the octopus before turning its attention to the unlucky boat. Later, the lone survivor identifies this giant as Frankenstein, and when it makes a chaotic appearance at Haneda Airport, speculation erupts that this is the same kaiju Japan dealt with before. However, the experts who worked closely with that giant they called Frankenstein disagree, arguing that this wild, people-eating monster is not the boy they rescued and raised. And they're right. But soon enough, there are two so-called Gargantuas on the loose, and as the title suggests, peaceful coexistence is not an option. The movie stars Russ Tamblyn, Kumi Mitsuno, and Kenji Sahara. For some reason, American actor Nick Adams, who had starred in previous UPA collaborations Invasion of Astro Monster and Frankenstein Conquers the World, was not asked to repeat his role. Adams was first replaced with Tab Hunter, who was then replaced with Russ Tamblyn. From the crew's perspective, this turned out to be a regrettable decision. Reports seemed to be unanimous that Tamblyn was difficult to work with and caused them a lot of grief both during and after production. Allegedly, he didn't think much of the script he was given and therefore ad-libbed many of his lines, unaware that dialogue for the American release would have to be dubbed. Later, when he was called upon to re-record his lines for the dialogue track, he couldn't remember what exactly he'd said, so matching the audio up with his lip movements was more trouble than it should have been. Technicalities aside, I just find it hard to take Russ Tamblyn seriously in this role. Not that it's a serious movie, but there is little humor in his part, making it a strained contrast with the musical roles he's most known for in West Side Story, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Tom Thumb. Those films allowed him to be goofy and show off his acrobatic talents. This movie gives him very little to do, so it seems like odd casting. Besides, I liked Nick Adams in the previous movie and thought he did well. Leading lady Kumi Mitsuno does return, basically playing the same character working at a research hospital. They changed her name, but despite that, her presence marks the strongest point of consistency and connection between the two stories, since even Frankenstein himself looks completely different. Her character is upset that Frankenstein is being maligned in the press and hunted by the military. Repeatedly, she speaks in his defense. All of the scientists want to keep him alive, but she's emotionally invested in his welfare, especially after he saves her life in the woods, suggesting that he remembers her from his youth. To fill in any viewers who didn't see the previous movie, they include a flashback, which is like a replica of a scene from Frankenstein Conquers the World, but Frankenstein and the male lead are replaced. In other words, it's a revisionist flashback. If you watch the Japanese version, which I did, Kenji Sahara gets top billing. He gets third if you're watching the American cut. He was in Frankenstein Conquers the World, but he did not play Nick Adams and Kumi Mitsuno's colleague. That was Tadao Takashima. And then there's the not-so-jolly green giant. You may or may not know that I take notes while I'm watching these movies that I plan to review, and I didn't know what to call him in my notes for the first half, so I just went with Gargantua, shortened to Garg, because that's what people in the movie kept calling him. I did think that a bit odd. It's not a common word in English, and I would think giant the more simple, more likely identification. I was also amused by how many times and how many different ways Gargantua was misspelled in the subtitles. As for the actual character, I don't know what else to say about him except that he's ugly. so ugly. He's got a huge head, a hideous face, thick, gnarly patches of matted hair, fur, hair. He's got hair on his head, fur on his entire body, I don't know. Arms that are just a little too short. The scene when he comes on land at Haneda Airport is noteworthy. It's different from your usual rubber suit monster versus miniatures landing sequence because, for once, this kaiju is human-shaped, traipsing through the area in what looks like leafy green footy pajamas. I can't get past how ugly he is, though. I feel like I should apologize because he's kind of like a person, but it just, every time he's on screen, all I can think is, wow, he is just ugh. And thanks to that, the film was able to give us this truly terrifying moment. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but at a certain point, about a third of the way in, I got bored. The military offensive goes on for a long time, and it's repetitive, even more repetitive than it tends to be in these movies. I do appreciate the ease with which he tosses the tanks and takes down the helicopters. That's entertaining, but those are the most interesting parts in a segment that seemed to stretch on and on. Thankfully, the end of this battle brings about a welcome plot twist. A second giant, an orange one, emerges from the forest, coming to Gargantua's aid and eyeing the Japanese military warily as he helps him escape. I knew there were going to be two Gargantuas, the title gives it away, but the movie kind of lulled me into forgetting. The 3 minutes of Gargantua being electrocuted just kind of put me in a stupor, so this twist actually managed to be a surprise. Immediately after, the government issues a statement that henceforth the Sea Frankenstein will be known as Gila, and the Mountain Frankenstein will be known as Sonda. I think that's asking a lot, calling them Frankenstein and Gargantua for half the movie, and then poof, switching to Sonda and Gila, and just expecting me to go along with it. Yes, I talked about this in the review of Frankenstein vs. Baragon. I wrestle with the notion that these characters have anything to do with any creation of Mary Shelley's, but regardless, you can't just casually change names midstream like that and expect it to stick. So make sure you got it straight. The green one is Gila, G, Gila, Gargantua, Jolly Green Giant, not so Jolly Green Giant, and the one that they called Frankenstein, against my wishes, is now called Sonda. Sonda, by the way, looks slightly less ugly than Gila, slightly, so they did a good job making it easy to differentiate which one is the protagonist and which one is the antagonist. He does have kind of a Dr. Zaius thing going on, though. It's the hair. Why is his hair like that? For the most part, the human character plot revolves around the solving of the scientific mystery. They go looking for answers about the giant's DNA and Gila's origins, believing Gila's cells will make everything clear. Clear as mud. Somehow they realize that the Gargantuas have immortal cells, a concept that's carried over from the previous movie, although there is no mention made of the immortal heart. Furthermore, it's revealed that Gila, the second giant, is a product of natural cloning. As Frankenstein, Sonda escaped to the mountains in the previous film, a piece of his flesh tore off. That flesh fed on plankton and grew into Gila. Okay. Sure. Why not? I'm being facetious here, I can't help it, but on a serious note, seeing the Gargantuas interact with each other makes them both feel a lot more human, and it's refreshingly different. Sonda nurses the injured Gila and looks after him while they hide out, and it's quite endearing. It's shortly after this that we get one of the film's best visuals, a nice shot of the misty woods, and then a pan up to reveal Gargantua standing there. As it was in Frankenstein Conquers the World, slow motion is often used when the giants are walking or running to make them seem bigger and heavier. I imagine this was a more manageable costume for the suit actors than those they often had to wear. No tails, no spines, no cumbersome headpieces. They don't have to crawl around on their hands and knees. Frequent Godzilla actor Haruo Nakajima plays Gyla, the more prominent role, and Yu Sakita plays Sanda. Looking at his filmography, I believe this was his first foray into this kind of work, but not his last. He went on to play Ebirah, Mechanicon, Gorosaurus, Anguirus, Gabara, and Godzilla in Son of Godzilla. It's impressive how, costumes and heavy makeup notwithstanding, they both bring some nuance into their interactions. For instance, when reasonable, gentle Sanda tries to get Gyla to calm down and stop being so aggressive. To no avail, Gyla is wild, ferocious, and hopelessly chaotic. When Sanda discovers Gyla has eaten some innocent hikers because he littered their hiding spot with their chewed-up, spat-out clothing, Sanda gets so angry that he starts beating him with a tree. This confirms the suspicion that he has some lingering sympathetic link with humans and a sense of right and wrong. We don't usually see this kind of emotion and reaction in kaiju, so this is a big deal. The final showdown, which is pretty much the last third of the movie, is Gyla versus Sanda, then Gyla versus Sanda and the Japanese Self-Defense Force, then just Gyla versus Sanda again. Japan is faced with a catch-22 here. Gyla is a menace and must be stopped, but there's danger in attempting to destroy him because if his cells scatter, they might end up with even more Gargantuas. I think we're supposed to root for Sanda to live, but the only good solution is for both giants to die. Gyla was accidentally created, formed, by a loose bit of Sanda's flesh. If they keep Sanda alive, which the scientists propose doing, what's to prevent this whole thing happening again and again? And that loose bit of flesh was something that had traveled out into the ocean. Hypothetically, if you have loose bits of flesh flying everywhere, go in all different directions, and feed on things in the ocean, and then you could have Gargantuas popping up all over the world. Wow. They did say that they would try to keep Sanda contained, but we know how well that always works out. The climax is a noisy fight that's shaping up to end in a draw until it's interrupted by a volcano ex machina. An underwater volcano shoots up practically right beneath them and starts erupting while Sanda and Gyla continue to go at each other. And then it ends so abruptly that in my notes I wrote, "Wait, it's over?" The one character says to the other, "They couldn't have survived that volcano." And then he says, "Is there confirmation that they're dead?" "No." The end! I assume they were leaving a door open for a third movie, which didn't happen. Either that, or they just painted themselves into a corner. They didn't know how to end it. There are a few other things I'd like to mention. The film features the music of Akira Ifukube, of course. Many parts of the score sound familiar. Ifukube did recycle music sometimes, so that's probably why. The music in the beginning of the film is especially good. It opens with some nice theremin, and then a dark, scary theme that fits the action in that opening sequence, the part with the octopus, very nicely. Speaking of music, how many people were waiting for me to get to this part? This film features a random musical number performed at a rooftop restaurant. The singer is Kip Hamilton, whose career mainly consisted of guest appearances on American TV shows in the late 50s through the mid-60s. She pursued a singing career, but it never took off. Based solely on this performance, I'm not surprised she didn't make it big. It seems like she's trying to sound like Connie Francis without quite hitting the mark. and the song does not do her any favors. Officially, it's titled Feel in My Heart, but it's more commonly known as The Words Get Stuck in My Throat, and it's not a good song. It's a song that'll get stuck in your head.
The words get stuck in my throat. The words get stuck in my throat.
It's not the worst song, but the lyrics are mediocre at best.
If I had a hidden microphone inside of my heart, I would turn the power on. It would amplify my love for you and swear to always love you and you'd never be gone.
I don't mind a non sequitur solo number or two in a 1930s or 1940s movie that winds up in a nightclub, but there's something awkward about this. The staging, the song itself, the performance, and then seconds after its clumsy conclusion, the not-so-jolly green giant shows up and grabs her. He almost eats her, but the lights come back on and he drops her like a hot potato in his haste to get away. The whole scene is just bizarre, because it's not played for laughs, it's a sober scene. She gets injured and it's serious. Nothing about the tone implies that you're supposed to laugh, but you can't help thinking, is this supposed to be funny? Like, the song was so bad that Gargantua came out of the water to keep the singer from singing anymore? Are we supposed to cheer when this happens? Because I watched this scene separately in a YouTube video, and I saw some really interesting responses to the song, to what happens to the singer, and I think there are a lot of people who like this scene for reasons that were not the original intent. So now I've seen The War of the Gargantuas twice. Once to view it for writing the review, and the second time to get images and clips. I admit I've always had a feeling I might not be as into this movie as some other people are, and, well, I know myself. I was correct. I do appreciate it, especially for all the ways it's different from other Toho kaiju movies, but it just doesn't grab me. I don't find the story, or the giants, or the human characters that appealing. Clearly, among fans of these movies, I'm in the minority. This is a popular kaiju film, and it's been cited as a favorite on some big, famous people's lists. Guillermo del Toro, Tim Burton, Quentin Tarantino. Brad Pitt apparently said it was the movie that made him want to be an actor. For a lot of its fans, I'm guessing it has strong nostalgic appeal, especially for those who saw it as kids a few years after its initial release in the 70s. And we all know nostalgia is potent stuff. I just can never tell when someone says they love it if they're referring to it as a serious favorite or as an, oh, I love to laugh at it favorite. Do they prefer it because they feel it's genuinely superlative, or because they think it's outrageous and that makes them happy? Both are perfectly legitimate opinions, but they're very different takes. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The War of the Gargantuas. I hope you enjoyed this review, whether you are a die-hard fan of this movie or not. Do let me know what you think of it if you have seen it in the comments below, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.